Elon Musk has just sent a shockwave across Washington and Wall Street by openly warning that Tesla could move its factories out of the United States if the government does not change its current trade and regulatory stance. This isn't a random tweet or a publicity stunt. This is the world's most valuable electric vehicle company, directly threatening the US economy at a moment when American manufacturing is already struggling to survive global competition. Musk is not bluffing. He's openly frustrated with rising tariffs on raw materials, mounting labor disputes, energy costs, and what he calls anti-innovation regulations in America. If Tesla actually follows through, tens of thousands of US jobs could vanish overnight, billions in state tax revenues could collapse, and America could lose its claim as the global hub of EV innovation. The reason this statement matters is simple: Tesla is not just another car company. It is the flagship of America's electric revolution. Without Tesla, China's BYD and European EV makers would dominate even faster, leaving the US far behind in a market projected to hit $9 trillion by 2035. But the bigger question is, why would Musk even consider abandoning the country that gave Tesla its identity? The answer lies in America's own economic contradictions. On one hand, the government wants to promote clean energy and EV adoption. On the other hand, its aggressive tariffs on imported parts, ongoing disputes with China, and union wage pressures are making Tesla's US factories less profitable by the month. Musk has been pushing back against the Biden administration's favoritism toward union-backed EV makers like Ford and GM, while Tesla gets sidelined in federal subsidy programs. Add to that the rising cost of lithium, nickel, and rare earths, most of which come from outside the US, and Musk sees a perfect storm that makes building cars in America increasingly unsustainable. He knows he has options. Mexico offers lower labor costs and closer access to US markets, while countries like India and even China can provide massive tax breaks and supply chain efficiency that America can't match right now. This isn't just business leverage, it's a direct threat to America's economic credibility. If Tesla even begins shifting core production away from the US, foreign investors will read it as a sign that America can't protect or sustain its most innovative companies. That could trigger ripple effects across industries far beyond autos, tech, semiconductors, clean energy, even aerospace. Remember, Musk doesn't just control Tesla. He runs SpaceX, Neuralink, and Starlink, all tied into America's economic and security future. If Washington underestimates this warning, it risks pushing out the single most influential entrepreneur of the 21st century. And that is exactly why markets, policymakers, and foreign competitors are glued to Musk's every word right now, because Tesla leaving the US wouldn't just be a company decision. It would be a turning point for the global balance of economic power. To understand how dangerous this threat is for the US economy, you need to look at the scale of Tesla's footprint inside America. Tesla isn't just a car maker, it is one of the largest private employers in states like Texas, Nevada, and California. Its gigafactories employ tens of thousands of skilled workers, generate billions in state and federal tax revenue, and sustain entire ecosystems of smaller suppliers, contractors, and service providers. If Tesla even partially relocates, every one of those states faces an economic shock. Texas, for example, has built its future industrial identity around Tesla's massive Austin Gigafactory. Nevada has billions tied into Tesla's battery production. California, despite Musk's long feud with its regulators, still depends on Tesla's operations for high-tech manufacturing jobs. When a company of this size leaves, it doesn't just pull its own workers out, it collapses thousands of secondary businesses, from logistics companies to parts manufacturers, who rely on Tesla's contracts to stay alive. In short, Tesla leaving America would ignite a ripple effect across the entire US labor market and supply chain, creating a hole that cannot easily be filled by Ford, GM, or any traditional automaker. But the risk is not only about jobs. It's about America's position in the global economic order. Tesla is not just an automaker, it is the poster child of American innovation. Its success story is used as proof that the US is still the world's leader in technology and clean energy. If Musk takes Tesla's crown jewel factories to Mexico or Asia, that global narrative instantly collapses. China would accelerate its dominance with BYD, NIO, and other EV giants, while Europe would tighten its grip through Volkswagen and Mercedes. The US would be left with legacy automakers struggling to catch up and politically backed subsidies that cannot deliver true innovation. For Washington, this would be more than embarrassing. It would be a direct strategic loss in the race for control of the world's next trillion-dollar industry. This is exactly why Musk's words are so powerful. He knows the White House, governors, and Wall Street all understand the magnitude of Tesla's influence. By threatening relocation, Musk is holding a loaded gun at the heart of America's industrial revival plans. The Biden administration has spent billions promoting the idea of "Made in America, clean energy jobs," but if Tesla, the most famous EV brand on the planet, walks away, that narrative is instantly exposed as hollow. Foreign investors and trade partners will question whether the US can actually protect its innovators or whether it will choke them with red tape and conflicting trade policies. Even politically, Musk's statement is dynamite. Democrats cannot afford to look weak on jobs and innovation in the run-up to 2024 and beyond. Republicans, on the other hand, could seize on Musk's threat as proof that Biden's economic policies are driving businesses out of America. In other words, this single statement from Musk has the power to shape not just markets, but the political battlefield of the United States. And while most people assume Musk is bluffing, history proves otherwise. When he felt California's lockdown policies were crushing Tesla, he didn't hesitate to shift operations to Texas. When regulators or unions pushed back, he moved resources aggressively. Musk has always played hardball with governments, and more often than not, he wins. That track record is why his warning today cannot be dismissed as empty noise. Washington knows Musk has the resources, the global connections, and the fanatical investor base to make a relocation real. If that happens, the fallout won't just be economic, it will be a humiliation for America on the world stage. When you look at where Tesla could realistically go if it abandons US soil, 3 countries immediately stand out: Mexico, India, and China. Each of these locations offers unique advantages that directly expose America's weaknesses. Mexico is the most immediate threat because it sits right next to the US border and is already locked into a trade agreement under USMCA, which means cars built in Mexico can still flow into the American market without the crushing tariffs that apply to Asian imports. Labor costs are far lower, environmental regulations are looser, and the Mexican government has been aggressively courting Tesla with tax incentives and fast-track permits. If Musk expands his Mexico Gigafactory and shifts US production there, Tesla would retain access to the massive American consumer base while slashing costs and proving that America's "Made in USA" policy can be bypassed with ease. For Washington, that would be a nightmare. US workers would lose their jobs, while consumers would still be buying Teslas, only this time, stamped "Made in Mexico." India presents another dangerous alternative. The Modi government has been pushing Tesla hard to set up production there, offering Musk favorable deals on land, tax breaks, and even relaxed import duties on components. India has one of the world's fastest-growing middle-class markets and is aggressively building its EV ecosystem. If Tesla plants a gigafactory in India, it wouldn't just cut costs, it would gain direct access to a billion-person consumer market, bypass China, and strengthen ties with a nation that the US desperately needs as an ally against Beijing. Ironically, Tesla moving to India could benefit US geopolitics in one way, by strengthening an ally, but it would simultaneously crush America's credibility as a manufacturing hub. Investors and competitors would ask, if even Tesla chooses India over the US, why should any other tech company bet on American factories? And then comes the most dangerous option of all, China. Musk already has a massive footprint in Shanghai, where Tesla's Gigafactory produces more cars than any other facility in the world. Despite ongoing tensions between Washington and Beijing, Tesla has become deeply entangled in China's supply chains for batteries, rare earths, and lithium. If Musk decides to quietly double down on China, expanding there while shrinking US operations, it would hand Beijing a propaganda victory on a silver platter. Imagine the optics. The US government imposing tariffs and preaching about American jobs, while Tesla, the most iconic US clean energy brand, funnels more investment into China. That would not just be an economic defeat but a symbolic surrender in the tech war. And Musk knows this. He understands the leverage that comes from dangling these three options, Mexico, India, China, in front of Washington, forcing US policymakers to decide whether to bend to his demands or risk watching Tesla strengthen America's competitors. This is why Musk's threat has shaken global markets. Investors know that relocation is not a fantasy, it is a weapon. Every time Tesla shifts production abroad, it sends a message that the US cannot hold on to its innovators. For America, this is bigger than one company. It raises the question of whether the US can still compete in a globalized economy where labor, resources, and governments are willing to offer companies whatever they need to walk away from American soil. If Tesla takes the leap, it will set a precedent for other tech giants, showing that loyalty to the US economy is negotiable. And that precedent could break the very foundation of America's industrial comeback strategy. The critical question now is simple: what happens next? If Tesla actually follows through and shifts large-scale production out of America, the immediate consequences will be brutal. Tens of thousands of American workers will lose their jobs, states like Texas and Nevada will see billions in tax revenue evaporate, and Wall Street will face a confidence shock. Tesla's departure would send a message to global investors that the US cannot even hold on to its most innovative, homegrown company. That perception alone could trigger a wider corporate exodus as other firms begin questioning whether they should continue scaling inside America when cheaper, faster, and friendlier options exist abroad. The US government's entire manufacturing comeback narrative, built on the promise of reshoring jobs, revitalizing supply chains, and leading the EV revolution, would collapse in real time. Instead of being the hub of the world's clean energy future, America would be exposed as a place where even its champions choose to leave. And while consumers might still buy Teslas imported from Mexico, India, or China, the symbolic loss of Tesla as an American manufacturing leader would mark a turning point in global economic history. But the alternative scenario is just as dangerous. Suppose Washington bends to Musk's pressure. That would mean major concessions, reduced tariffs on raw materials, looser labor and union laws, perhaps billions in additional subsidies or tax breaks specifically designed to keep Tesla anchored on US soil. At first glance, this might seem like a win: America keeps its jobs, Tesla stays, the political narrative is saved. But the cost of those concessions would ripple across the economy. Other companies would see Musk's victory and realize that threatening relocation is the fastest way to extract government handouts. Suddenly, every major manufacturer, Ford, GM, Intel, even smaller clean energy startups, would start demanding the same treatment, using the same playbook. Washington would face an impossible dilemma: either grant endless subsidies to keep corporations at home or risk mass departures. In other words, giving in to Musk could trigger a wave of corporate extortion that makes America weaker in the long run. This is the double-edged sword that makes Musk's warning so dangerous. If he leaves, America loses its crown jewel of innovation. If he stays, it might only be because Washington caved under pressure, setting a precedent that erodes the government's bargaining power with every other corporation. Either way, Tesla has already exposed the fragility of America's economic strategy. For all the political slogans about "Made in the USA", the reality is that companies will always chase profits, efficiency, and freedom from regulation. Musk has reminded the world that no matter how iconic a company is, national loyalty comes second to global opportunity. And for the US, that realization is not just uncomfortable, it is destabilizing. Because the moment the public, the markets, and foreign governments see that America cannot control its most powerful innovators, the entire foundation of its economic leadership begins to crack. And this brings us to the most pressing cliffhanger of all: what will Washington actually do? Will the Biden administration, already under pressure from inflation, trade wars, and political opposition, risk looking weak by negotiating with Musk behind closed doors? Or will it take a hardline stance and gamble that Tesla is bluffing? Either decision carries enormous risks, and the world is waiting for the first sign of which path the US will choose. The answer will not just determine Tesla's future, it will shape America's credibility as the leader of the global economy. At the end of the day, Musk's warning isn't just about one company or one billionaire, it's a test of America's entire economic model. For decades, the US has sold itself as the safest, most reliable, most profitable place in the world to build the future. Tesla has been the poster child of that promise, proof that an American startup could rise to global dominance and change an entire industry. If Tesla walks away, it is more than a factory closing or a few thousand jobs lost, it is the collapse of that narrative. It tells the world that even America's most successful innovators no longer believe the US can sustain their growth. That message would echo louder than any policy speech, louder than any trade deal, louder than any campaign promise. It would be the signal that America is no longer the default home of innovation, but just another option in a world where countries like China, India, and Mexico are ready to offer more. But here's the bigger danger: this crisis exposes a weakness that goes beyond Tesla, beyond Musk, beyond EVs. It reveals that America's economic revival is built on fragile ground. Decades of outsourcing hollowed out US manufacturing. Now, as Washington tries to bring it back, it discovers that innovation alone isn't enough. Companies demand lower costs, smoother supply chains, and friendlier governments. And if they don't get them, they leave. Tesla is simply the loudest example. If Musk proves he can bend Washington to his will or walk away without consequence, every other global company will take note. This is why Musk's threat has rattled not just markets, but policymakers and world leaders. It's not the possibility of losing one automaker, it's the possibility of losing the myth of American economic leadership. And make no mistake, the world is watching closely. China sees this as an opportunity to lure even more Western giants into its orbit. India sees it as a chance to prove it can replace China as the global manufacturing hub. Mexico sees it as a validation of its growing importance in North America's supply chain. Each of these countries would welcome Tesla with open arms, and each would use Tesla's move as proof that America is in decline. For allies, it would be a shock. For rivals, it would be a weapon. And for the US itself, it would be a crisis of credibility that cannot be easily repaired. This is why Musk's statement is not a bluff to be ignored, it is a warning shot that could reshape the global economy. If Washington treats it lightly, it risks underestimating the man who has repeatedly defied governments, disrupted industries, and rewritten the rules of business. If it overreacts, it risks handing Musk the power to dictate national policy. Either way, America is trapped in a dilemma that it cannot easily escape. And that is the true story here. Tesla leaving the US is not just a corporate relocation, it is a potential breaking point for America's claim to global leadership. So the next time you hear someone dismiss Musk's warning as noise, remember this: one decision, one factory, one move from Tesla could redraw the map of global trade. And right now, the world is waiting to see if America will fight to keep its future, or let it slip away.